A great show.
All right, I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. The crumbling case of Jussie Smollett and the shameful rise of the hate crime hoaxes in the age of the president, President Trump. Now, while the national media was happy to push the Smollett narrative, we'll speak exclusively to a local reporter who was suspicious from the start. And breaking just moments ago, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein set to officially step down next month. Very sad. Joe DeGeneva has been calling for this for a long time. He's here to react with that and a lot more. And what do former FBI leaders think of that Andy McCabe's interview with 60 Minutes last night? Two will join us later in the hour. You do not want to miss it. Unfiltered thoughts from men who were actually there and understood the professionalism required at the FBI. But first, phony victims who inflict real pain. That's the focus of tonight's angle. When the Jussie Smollett story first broke, many in the media seemed positively giddy. They were thrilled to push the story that MAGA-headed thugs attacked a black, gay, liberal actor, all in the name of Donald J. Trump.
Now to that attack on a star of the TV show Empire, Jussie Smollett.
Actor and musician Jussie Smollett from the hit show Empire was attacked and beaten early this morning in Chicago.
A Hollywood star who's black and gay, and now the victim of a heinous crime.
The idea of racial slurs and maybe even some of the homophobic slurs being used toward him, you can see how serious this crime is right now.
Absolutely despicable. And this is America in 2019.
Only as the Chicago Police Department investigated Smollett's story, none of it added up. Now police sources are telling various networks that Smollett himself choreographed the attack, paying a pair of Nigerian brothers to carry it out, even giving them money to buy rope at a local hardware store to make the noose. The trio even rehearsed the encounter in advance. Yet just last week, the Empire actor was afforded a friendly platform on GMA to shop and defend his anti-Trump script.
I could only go off of their words. I mean, who says Empire, this MAGA country?
Why do you think you were targeted?
I can just assume, I mean, I come really, really hard against 45. I come really, really hard against his administration. And I don't hold my tongue.
And the Oscar goes to, well, but eventually those stubborn things called facts got in the way. And suddenly CNN's Brian Stetler and others are now doing the backstroke.
There was a rush to judgment. I think it was mostly in the celebrity press and among activists and among Twitter people. I think it was a really careful reporting by news organizations.
If it turns out that Smollett did indeed orchestrated this attack, paid the attackers, then he's done infinitely more damage to the African-American community, people of color.
There's a lot to be concerned about here. So let's start with the fact that we don't have all the facts yet. We should get them. I think one thing we've learned from how this story is unfolded is let's wait and see.
Oh, finally, let's wait and see. Well, some journalists seem to fall into a state of absolute mourning. In the words of the AP's Lindsay Barr, the outrage has now been replaced by surprise, doubt, and bafflement as the singers, actors, and politicians who came out to support the Empire star struggle to digest the strange twists that the case has taken. Some conservative pundits, meanwhile, have gleefully seized on the moment. No, Lindsay, you're wrong. It was the left, the political media and Hollywood establishment that seized on the moment because this Smollett tall tale advanced their anti-Trump zealotry. Now we're learning just the inverse is true. Media and political heavyweights were once again willing to slander innocent people, an entire class of people, in a desperate attempt to justify their hatred of Donald Trump. The Democratic 2020 frontrunners tripped over themselves to fan the flames of the Smollett attack. Cory Booker and Kamala Harris called it, quote, a modern-day lynching and urged anti-lynching legislation in response to the attack. Well, on Sunday, Booker suddenly took a more sober, careful approach, saying he wouldn't further address the matter, quote, until all information actually comes out. How convenient. If only he had exercised such caution when the story first broke. Of course, he tried to get off the defensive really fast, though, contending at a town hall that
we know in America that bigoted and biased attacks are on the rise in a serious way. We actually even know in this country that since 9/11, the majority of the terrorist attacks on our soil have been right-wing terrorist attacks.
Oh, the man has absolutely zero shame. Ditto for Kamala Harris.
Which tweet? What tweet?
About saying that it is a modern-day lynching, that...
Sorry.
Yes, Jussie Smollett.
Okay, so I will say this about that case. I think that the facts are still unfolding, and I'm very concerned about, obviously, the initial allegation that he made about what might have happened.
I like how she does this and then laughs. It's really funny. Not. Well, of course, the dim bulbs in the entertainment industry were also eager to advance the MAGA lynching story, taking Smollett at his word, despite circumstances that, let's face it, were really fishy from the outset. Canadian actress Ellen Page made the pilgrimage to Colbert, where she made the mistake of delivering her own lines.
The Vice President of America wishes I didn't have the love with my wife. Connect the dots. This is what happens. If you are in a position of power and you hate people and you want to cause suffering to them, you go through the trouble, you spend your career trying to cause suffering. What do you think is going to happen? And people are going to be beaten on the street.
Well, this is a classic example of wish fulfillment syndrome. When you want something so desperately that you're able to ignore the obvious warning signs. Now think about it this way. The left has staked so much of their own identity and credibility on the plot line that Trump is a really bad man, that they need him to be a really bad man. One who inspires vitriol and violence like the sort that the Empire actor alleged. Now, Smollett himself is rabidly anti-Trump, and speculation is swirling that he orchestrated the faux attack to propel himself to some type of hero status in Hollywood. In other words, kind of think of it the new superhero, Jussie, the MAGA Slayer. Well, the same rush to judgment, though, happened recently with the Covington Catholic high school boys, when allegations became liberal gospel. The white kids in the red hats may as well have been wearing white hoods. Like Kavanaugh accusers Christine Blasey Ford and Julie Swetnick before him, Smollett was allowed to dominate a news cycle because his allegations ultimately reflected badly on President Trump, or so he hoped. But where's the justice when the social justice warriors are actually the ones purveying fraud, hatred, and poison? Nick Sandmann, that Covington Catholic kid, is right to sue everyone who accused him of racism, and I hope he wins big. Brett Kavanaugh had his life turned upside down in the most humiliating way, and we're still waiting for the DOJ prosecution of Swetnick and Avenatti. And meanwhile, Blasey Ford herself collected over $800,000 through a GoFundMe account, supposedly applied to cover her security costs. And as for that Feinstein staffer who likely leaked her original letter, we're still waiting on the Senate Judiciary Committee's findings there. But the fact is, most of the left-wing false accusers operate with impunity because conservatives usually choose to just move on. That's a huge mistake. If these phonies like Smollett aren't made to pay for their defamatory tall tales, we'll just see more of it as 2020 approaches. Even the man who is in the false narrative Hall of Fame seems to kind of agree.
If it is found that Smollett and these gentlemen did in some way perpetrate something that is not true, they ought to face accountability to the maximum. But let's not act like this is some left-wing hoax that some are saying on social media.
Oh, no, it's not a left-wing hoax at all, Al. Okay. Well, what is it then? Well, oh, speaking of frauds, maybe Andrew McCabe can argue that the president himself hired Smollett and the Nigerians at the behest of the Russians to carry out the whole thing. Hey, they might as well try to bring all these fraudulent storylines together. Think about how much fun that'll be. And that's the angle. Joining me now is someone who has done some of the best and some of the most honest reporting on this case from day one, is Rafer Weigel. And he's a reporter with our Fox affiliate in Chicago, and he joins us now. Rafer, when did this story, to you, start looking really suspicious?
Well, as soon as we heard about it, I first off want to apologize for my casual dress here. I'm actually on a mini vacation with my son here in Las Vegas, so I dressed for Cirque du Soleil. I didn't dress for your show, Laura.
No problem. You're excused.
Okay, thank you. As soon as police let us know about it, I immediately called my sources at Chicago PD. My colleagues and I in the media locally, we were skeptical from the very beginning, and so were police, but that's our job to be skeptical. You know, it's the old adage, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. So when we started reporting the story in Chicago, we did not report that Jussie Smollett was attacked. We reported that Jussie Smollett says he was attacked. I've grown up in Chicago. I've lived there most of my life, and, you know, this was a pretty outlandish claim that he made, given the geography in Streeterville, which is a very heavily populated area, a lot of people walking around, you know, something as extreme as this, wearing red hats, carrying bleach, putting a noose around someone's neck. It seemed very unlikely that in that area nobody would have stepped in. Nobody would have videotaped it with their cell phone.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
So go ahead,
hold on.
sorry.
I have so many questions. Did anyone from the national media call you and say, look, Rafer, you know the area, you're a longtime resident, Chicago, what are you hearing? Because I was seeing a lot of people, it was almost gleefully jumping on the story, because it fulfilled a narrative that a lot of people on the left or who lean left want to believe. That Donald Trump hates all these people.
I'm generally a defender of my profession when we get attacked, but at the end of the day, we did mostly drop the ball. I mean, we did not at Fox 32, but my media cohorts definitely did when they immediately reported that he was attacked without getting all of the facts. And when I tweeted out the skepticism that I was getting from within the Chicago Police Department, I was attacked, and I didn't take it personally because I did know that they were, you know, these were people who wanted a specific narrative, but I felt confident in my sources that, you know, everything that I was learning was accurate. They told me, you know, you can bet on this. Yes, he was carrying the Subway sandwich on video when he walked back into his condo. You know, yes, we didn't find this on video anywhere. So, you know, I just stuck to the facts.
Yeah. It didn't happen. You were attacked. And I think everyone watching, first of all, thank you for coming on when you're supposed to be with your family. Really appreciate it, because everyone wanted you on their show tonight. So thank you for coming on. This is what Black Lives Matter spokesman said, DeRay McKesson, okay? He said, I realized today that Chicago reporter Rafer Weigel is responsible for much of the misinformation disseminated by Chicago PD sources about Jussie Smollett, as he literally just repeats whatever the police say. And there were other similar things. Chad Griffin also said something very similar about leaks that were given to local reporters. And basically, this is why victims of hate crimes, what they fear and why they often stay silent. So the microscope was then trained on you and your local reporter colleagues at other networks who are just like, guys, who walks into their apartment with the noose around their neck or waits to take the noose off? You know, none of that made sense to kind of just regular workaday reporters, and yet you're attacked.
Well, I didn't take it personally. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, real journalism shouldn't be partisan, but I understand this is a story that became heavily politicized from both the left and the right. Everybody wanted their own narrative, and all we wanted to do at my shop was to just stick to the facts. We do have an intimate relationship with Chicago PD. We have sources in there. They've told us things about this investigation that we are not reporting because we don't want to compromise the investigation. It's a delicate balance. You know, we want to hold them accountable, but at the same time, we also, you you know, we have to deliver what we know. And sometimes we are getting things from sources that maybe they don't want us to report. For instance, the fact that the brothers admitted that they were paid, that they did rehearse this, and that it was staged. You know, from what I understand, Jussie Smollett was on his way in to talk to police, and once it got out that these brothers had essentially rolled over on him, he changed his mind. And I talked to his crisis manager, Ann Kavanaugh, this morning, and she said that right now they don't have any plans to bring him in. So, I mean, in terms of the reports of the grand jury, TMZ came out with that. Police tell me that's premature. That would only be a last resort if Smollett does not come in voluntarily. And right now they're hoping he still will.
He ain't coming in.
It's weird because his attorney said that they're cooperating, but right now it doesn't appear that they are.
Right. Rafer, thank you so much for joining us and for your reporting on this in a sober, pragmatic, and unbiased manner. We really, really appreciate it. By the way, we also learned today that, as Rafer just reported, so Smollett is refusing to meet with police. That, according to this statement from his, as you've heard, crisis management consultant. Yes, he has hired a crisis management consultant. Now, Ann Kavanaugh, who Rafer is also talking to, is saying Smollett's attorneys will keep an active dialogue going with Chicago police on his behalf. We have no further comment today. So at what point does the Chicago Police Department compel Smollett to speak to them? Look what they did to Roger Stone. They showed up with like 17 vehicles and guns drawn. I'm not saying they should do that, by the way, but I'm just talking about the overreaction with Stone. To provide some insight, we're joined by former LAPD detective, Fox News contributor, Mark Furman. All right, Mark, I've been dying to talk to you about this case. Number one, from the beginning, we had said here on this show, these are really serious allegations. They sound really bizarre, but every fact should be followed, every lead. I mean, so this is what we said, and it started to get odder and odder as time went on. But he won't speak to police now, and I don't think he's going to speak unless he's compelled to. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. I don't think he's going to, because he has nothing to say except for the truth. They're certainly not going to listen to his lies. They've got everything prepared to actually destroy every kind of alibi, lie, or fantasy that he's going to create. So when you look at this right from the beginning, the red flags are huge. First, this is not Trump country in Chicago. And the second thing, it wasn't much of a beating. All I saw for injuries was a little scratch on his right cheek. The suspects let him keep the phone in which he was talking to his manager at the time of the attack, and the manager heard the yelling and the screaming. So when you look at all this, and then no property was taken, there wasn't much of a beating, it's one of those raised eyebrow things that the first officers feel when they get there, and they tell the detectives, and they go, okay, let's go through the motions, but this smells. And this smelled from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning. I mean, again, you want to believe people, and they make such an incredibly, serious and disturbing allegation. I mean, it's hard. It is hard to believe people do this, but it happens. It happened with Kavanaugh. It happened with the Covington Catholic kids. It's happened in other cases, and it looks like it could very well have happened here. Now, Mark, so you raised all the red flags from the beginning. I think a lot of people were afraid to talk about those because then you're being, critical of someone who's a liberal, African-American, gay, and then all those hateful pejoratives come directed at you. So people were kind of afraid to say that. But now we find out that the police went into the apartment, or the place where the Nigerian gentlemen were living, and they seized a number of things from that apartment, and they're cooperating fully with the police. Can you go through why those items are so important to this investigation, the magazine and bleach and so forth?
Well, everything that was involved in Smollett's description of the attack on him, that's what they're looking for in the search warrant. So they have been unavailable. They've been in Nigeria. So during this whole time, I think the whole investigation for Smollett really came apart February 11th when he failed and refused to give them unredacted phone records. That was the first problem. Then they knew that their suspicions were probably true. When they got off the plane and they arrested him and they issued this search warrant and they went in, when they got these items, now they know that these two men have been connected to get into the apartment, and now they found evidence that further connects him. Now they had to explain it all. When they got to the station, I'm sure they were separated. I'm sure that they were confronted with the evidence, and I'm sure they rolled over in a heartbeat. And they rolled over simultaneously in 2 different rooms with the exact same story. They corroborated. I wouldn't doubt they gave them polygraphs. They probably gave them a money path, how the money was paid. So.
And the magazine, the letter that arrived in January 22nd, they seized the magazine, and maybe those letters were found cut out of that magazine. So this whole thing is, well, the developing facts. We're going to follow them where they take us. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. And it's not just Smollett and the Covington High School boys fiasco. There are other hate crimes hoaxes that we want to share with you tonight. Dinesh D'Souza will tell us what they reveal about our current culture and a lot more. Stay there. The Smollett hoax is one of many that fit a pattern. Angry Trumpkins unleash vicious and hate-filled attacks against sexual or racial minorities. Now, here are just a few of more than dozens that are out there. In December 2016, a Muslim woman said she was attacked by 3 white Trump supporters in New York City on the subway. She said they tried to rip off her hijab. Well, it never happened. And then one day after the 2016 election, a student at Bowling Green in Ohio said that white males wearing Trump shirts threw rocks at her and hurled racial slurs. Protests in a university town hall ensued. The student made up the entire incident. And in September of last year, a woman told police on Long Island she was driving home when 4 teens confronted her and yelled, "Trump 2016." And then they told her, quote, she didn't belong here. That, too, was made up. Here now is Dinesh D'Souza, conservative filmmaker and author. Dinesh, what does this tell us about the current political climate and the culture today?
Well, the first thing it tells us is that these fake racial incidents have become normalized. When the Tawana Brawley case broke a generation ago, this was a bogus racial incident involving an African-American woman who had claimed to have been abused and battered. It was anomalous. People really had to scratch their heads because this was such a freak episode. But now there's a procession of these bogus incidents, of which the Jussie Smollett case is only the latest. Now, I think for people watching, they're a little baffled because they probably think, what kind of dementia causes someone to do this? Why would somebody fabricate an incident? And I think that we're dealing here not so much with personal dementia, but what can be called ideological dementia. You touched on it earlier. There's a narrative here that they're trying to advance. The narrative is that the MAGA supporters, the Trump people, are a bunch of racists. Now, it's obviously a tribute to the Trumpsters that they are not racist, because the Jussie Smollets, despite being black, despite being flamboyantly gay, are going out there looking for people to pick on them, and nobody is. So the facts are not supporting the narrative at all. So they figure, why not make up the facts? Why not adapt the facts to the narrative rather than the other way around? And I think this is the demented psychology, the demented progressive psychology that drives these racial faked incidents. And the second reason for them is that they get away with it.
Well, and this is what my point, Dinesh, is that conservatives are quick to sort of say, oh, let's move on. I don't want to dwell on this. And the fact that we don't have people in jail after what happened to Brett Kavanaugh, with that Julie Swetnick, what Avenatti was pushing, all the promises of evidence of how he was drugging people, spiking the punch bowl, gang rapes, you know. And then, people just want to move on from that? I say no way. Otherwise, that stuff continues. Same deal with this Smollett case. It occupied everybody's time, and the Chicago PD was demonized. And, of course, Trump supporters are made out to be these horrible, awful, terrible, rotten people because, look, your people are doing this to this poor actor.
It's important to realize that the Jussie Smollett incident is a hate crime. It's a hate crime, but in the opposite direction. Remember, if Jussie Smollett basically wanted to go and beat himself up, that's not against the law. The real crime here was attempting to pin this blame on a bunch of people who did nothing, on innocent people. And it is this idea of trying to ultimately frame Trump supporters for something that Smollett himself perpetrated. So he's the perpetrator masquerading as the victim. It's very important that he be held accountable for that. Otherwise, the left basically thinks, let's keep trying this stuff. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, we get away with it.
Dinesh, excellent analysis as always. Thank you so much. And it's not enough to reveal these stories as hoaxes. As we're talking about tonight, it's very important that we run the whole gamut of these phony scandals and hoaxes and what happens after them. Is anyone ever going to do time? Is anyone going to get sued, and is it going to stick? We're going to learn more about this because today, Covington student Nick Sandman's lawyer says he's intending to file defamation suits this week. Yay. And that got us thinking, whatever happened to the criminal referrals recommended for Michael Avenatti and Brett Kavanaugh accuser Julie Swetnick? And what about the leak of Christine Blasey Ford's story? We reached out to the Senate Judiciary Committee and the DOJ and the FBI today. Only the FBI got back to us. They say they had no comment. Here now to weigh in, former U.S. Attorney Joe DeGenova. Joe, who's dropping the ball here? Where are the repercussions for this type of defamatory and I would say criminal behavior?
The Department of Justice for years has tried to avoid getting involved in these cases, and they're trying to do the same thing now. Bill Barr arrived today as the new Attorney General, and he's going to have a new Deputy Attorney General, and I think he will make sure that these cases are looked at. The Julie Swetnick and Michael Avenatti case, where they clearly submitted false affidavits and information to the Senate committee under oath, should be prosecuted. It should be put in front of a grand jury for this reason. We must prevent people from making false accusations during confirmation hearings so that they do not become again what the Kavanaugh hearing became. I personally believe not only did Swetnick lie, I believe that Christine Blasey Ford lied. I believe that her entire testimony was a falsehood, and I believe that she should be put in front of a grand jury and have her testimony investigated to the fullest. There is no doubt in my mind and in my opinion that she testified falsely against Brett Kavanaugh. But this must be investigated across the board, or we will encourage people to do the same thing in the future. We cannot have that.
No, and Joe, don't you agree that the Republicans always talk a good game in the moment? And you and I discussed this. You were here, Saul Weisenberg was here, and they're all tough. Like, we're gonna investigate, we're referring, and then all of a sudden you get nothing. Nothing happens.
Well, of course, the referral.
I think we might have lost Joe. Well, we might have Joe. We might have lost Joe. But I think I know what Joe was saying. Well, his point is the referral has to then go somewhere. You can't just say we're referring it and then never follow through. But I'm telling you, the left never lets go. They hold on, and they have like a death grip on an issue or a case. And you got to give them credit because they don't say let's just move on. They say how can we make the next point? Joe, thanks so much. And get this, some folks on the other networks are seriously referring to disgraced former FBI Director Andy McCabe as a, quote, patriot. Well, up next, two former high-ranking FBI officials are going to tell us what they think about his actions. And did you see that 60 Minutes interview? Oh, my goodness. We're going to play parts of it when we come back. Stay there. What former FBI Director Andy McCabe admitted on 60 Minutes last night should alarm all of you.
I didn't know when I'd be out of the job, so I just put my head down and got to work trying to stabilize the people around me and do the things that I felt we needed to do with the Russia investigation, getting cases opened and getting a special counsel appointed. Is there an inappropriate relationship, a connection between this president and our most fearsome enemy, the government of Russia?
Are you saying that the president is in league with the Russians?
I'm saying that the FBI had reason to investigate that. We talked about why the president had insisted on firing the director and whether or not he was thinking about the Russia investigation and did that impact his decision. And in the context of that conversation, the Deputy Attorney General offered to wear a wire into the White House. Now, he was not joking. He was absolutely serious. A discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort.
Okay, just to sum up what he just copped to. The newly promoted McCabe, out of political disdain, took it upon himself to become the ultimate resistance hero. He's setting in motion a counter-intel investigation against a sitting president of the United States, push for a special counsel, and openly discuss removing the duly elected president, commander-in-chief, from office. And folks on the other networks are calling this guy a patriot? Now, what do former high-ranking FBI officials think about all this? Let's discuss with a couple of the greats. Kevin Brock was the former FBI Assistant Director for Intel, and Terry Turchie was the former Deputy Assistant Director of Counterterrorism in the Counterterror Division. Kevin, now, you recently penned a piece calling McCabe's reemergence embarrassing. Why?
Yes, that's a huge embarrassment, and I think, and I think Terry will agree that for former FBI agents, and I've heard from a lot of current FBI agents right now, that what Andrew McCabe is doing and what he did last night further misled the American people and actually manipulated the American people, because now suddenly he's a victim. After perpetrating, along with Jim Comey, severe damage to the FBI because of their, now what we know, clear biases, he is going on a book tour to sell books.
Everyone's selling books. All the former FBI guys are all pushing their books.
Which is just
going to make money.
Amazing to us. So he's trying to rehabilitate himself, but the damage is done, and he continues to do more damage. He has claimed, as you just pointed out, when he became acting director, he went on a binge of opening cases against the President of the United States. On the 60 Minutes interview last night, he was deceptive and misleading.
How so? Give us some, little tags on that.
He stated that he had clear and articulable facts for opening up an FBI
What were those facts? I'm still waiting for the facts.
Well, he said, well, the President criticized our investigation. That was number one. Not a reason for opening up a case. He said that the President directed James Comey to let Michael Flynn off the hook. No, he didn't. If you go back and look at James Comey's notes, he didn't say that. Mm-hmm. He said that Rod Rosenstein was pressured to put the Russia investigation in. So, you know, there was all these things that don't rise to the level of opening up legitimately.
Yeah, but he looked really earnest, Terry. He looked really earnest. This guy, Malcolm Nance, was on MSNBC. He's a former counterterror specialist. And this is how he describes Terry McCabe last night.
These phrases, taking down an elected president, a bureaucratic coup, this is Donald Trump's characterization of what the patriots at the FBI and the Department of Justice, who were defending the Constitution of the United States.
Terry, that's all he was doing, defending the Constitution.
Yeah, he sure was. I'll tell you, Laura, first of all, I couldn't agree more with what Kevin just said to you. And I can't even watch this again tonight without my blood boiling. I'll make 3 points. Number one, as Kevin well knows, as all of us who worked in the FBI in those positions know, what he essentially told us last night is after having unverified information for a year in the form of the Christopher Steele dossier, and then going to the White House and being angry because former Director Comey had been fired and not liking the president's demeanor and the way he delivered words, he decided to go back and that the man was a great threat to America. That's about what we got last night, and that's about what the FBI had. It is embarrassing. It is just egregious, and I never thought in my lifetime I'd see this. And it's interesting that he opened that case in about May of 2017. You know, we had just come off by a couple of months, March, April, going back into January of 2017, where guess what had happened? We had the outgoing Obama administration unmasking people in the Trump transition team. Don't tell me that the collusion is now starting to come together, and it's not all pointing to the president and Russia. It's pointing it directly at politics in the top layer of the FBI. And Kevin knows, and I know, and anybody who's been in those spots up there on the 7th floor knows, that the FBI agents who were working in those top positions were not following the rules, the guidelines, or all of the policies we put together for decades to protect this.
Well, guys, for both of you, what kind of FBI acting director convenes or takes part in a meeting about the 25th Amendment and removing the president. Is that part of what an acting FBI director's responsibility is, to pronounce over meetings or to take part in them?
He should have immediately got up and excused himself from that meeting and said, I will not be part of this discussion. First of all, the FBI has no jurisdictional interest or abilities in the 25th Amendment discussion. So he should have immediately recognized he had no role and should not have been in that meeting.
Terry, Bill Barr just sworn in last week as the new Attorney General of the United States, former and now current. How does he proceed here? I mean, it's almost like the entire FBI has to be dismantled and kind of reborn to restore its integrity, because a lot of good people do work there. But it's so tainted now. This whole investigation was a fraud from the outset, and it is patently obvious to anyone who will take off their political, partisan cap and just look at the facts. And I think Andrew McCabe gave it away last night. He gave it away. I thought it was so obvious. They had nothing on Trump.
Exactly, and I think the big problem confronting the new Attorney General is this, and a lot of people may not want to get into this discussion. As we have a political party, the Democratic Party, turning harder and harder left, which in itself is a major national security risk, we also do not know exactly, to this day, exactly what happened in the FBI, whether there still exists within the FBI these kinds of issues, perhaps people appointed by McCabe before he left. And we need to get to the bottom of all these things that are still out there in the universe and all these loose ends. People need to know who orchestrated all this, because it is absolutely just unbelievable that there is not somebody behind all of this that pulled it together and compromised the FBI. And we're not even getting into the fact we could have had certainly we could have had anything from bribes to greed to ego.
Absolutely.
All of these things are factors here. Kevin and I never saw in the FBI anything like this. And in fact, we always prided ourselves as we left, pass along the FBI we found a little bit better to the next generation. Yeah. This didn't happen this time.
All right, Rosenstein's out. Barr has his new deputy, Jeff Rosen, former partner at Kirkland & Ellis, really good guy. Yeah. Is it time to finally, like just what you said at the beginning of the show, you need repercussions for bad behavior? Will there be?
I have already appealed in articles to the new Attorney General to launch an investigation into the actions of James Comey and Andrew McCabe. These two colluded and fed off each other's biases to do a lot of damage to the FBI.
Both of you, incredible conversation. And I know you guys don't do a lot of TV. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tennis legend Martina Navratilova is coming under huge fire for what she said about transgender women competing in women's events. Now, is it a form of cheating? That white-hot debate next. Do transgender athletes have an unfair advantage when competing in women's sports? Tennis Hall of Famer Martina Navratilova, a gay rights advocate, said this week of transgender women competing in female sports, quote, to put the argument at its most basic, a man can decide to be a female, take hormones if required by whatever sporting organization is concerned, win everything in sight and perhaps earn a small fortune, and then reverse his decision and go back to making babies if he so desires. It's insane and it's cheating. I'm happy to address a transgender woman in whatever form she prefers, but I would not be happy to compete against her. Here now to debate, Sid Ziegler, founder of Outsports.com, and Meg Kilgannon, a member of Hands Across America. Okay, Sid, now, here's some of the tweets coming in about Martina Navratilova. I mean, we all grew up watching Martina, huge fan, huge tennis fan. This is Rachel McKinnon. Martina Navratilova has removed all doubt. She is absolutely transphobic. Another tweet, Transactual says, we're pretty devastated to discover that Martina is transphobic. If trans women had an advantage in sport, why aren't trans women winning gold medals left, right, and center, etc.? Sid, biologically, isn't this pretty tough for women to compete against men who transition into a new gender because their bodies are still, different? Broader shoulders, stronger upper body, et cetera. How is it fair?
Well, thanks for talking about this. If you look across the history of transgender female athletes, Not a single woman, one of them, has ever dominated their sports. Lots of people like Martina Navratilova throw up these boogeymen of men who are somehow going to seek fame and fortune in women's sports. Martina knows perfectly well how undervalued women's sports are in our culture. So this boogeyman that she throws up is totally ludicrous. And again, no trans woman has ever dominated.
But it's kind of just starting, right?
Not any sport.
But it's kind of just I mean, to be fair,
Well,
it's
I don't
just
know.
kind
Renee
of starting.
Richards,
Correct? I mean, Meg,
Renee
it just,
Richards was playing tennis.
yeah. No,
in the
I get it. But
and there
like
have
in
been plenty of
Connecticut,
others.
in Connecticut, where I'm from,
Yes.
there is it's a real controversy involving track and field.
Track and field.
And Andrea Yarwood dominates,
Yes.
and is not fully transitioned, I guess, but dominates and beating everyone.
Absolutely. They took state titles away from girls in that situation. I mean, this is a ridiculous argument that women are not going to suffer because men are competing in our sports. That's just ridiculous on its face.
But what about the argument of equality, that trans athletes want to compete in the area they want to compete in, and they make it an equality thing, so if you oppose them, you're a horrible, awful, rotten person?
Well, trans women are men, and women should not be forced to compete against men. This is basic fairness. I'm really grateful for Martina for speaking out. She's going to make a lot of space for more women and more athletes to speak out on this and say what we really believe, which is that women should not have to compete against men in sports. It's very simple.
Yeah, Sid, you must be a big fan of Martina, right? I mean, she's openly gay, advocate, been out there for years, doing so much for women's sports, girls' sports in high school. She's done a huge amount, and I was a pretty big athlete, so I love that. So to call her transphobic, I mean, I think people just lose credibility when they start going after Martina Navratilova as some hater. Come on.
Yeah, listen, I watched Martina in the 80s and 90s. She's a hero. She's a hero for a lot of people, for women, for gay people. But on this issue, she's wrong. Men are not streaming into women's sports to cheat or steal medals away from women. Trans women are.
So your argument,
women,
though, Sid, your argument is that they're not doing it.
Say that they're men.
Right, but your argument is they're not doing it. It is a biological fact that internal organs of men are bigger, right? The heart, the lungs, they have a larger capacity. That's not a hateful thing to say. It's just a fact. So because people aren't dominating now, if the top 100 or top 1,000 men in tennis wanted to get into women's sports and were transitioning, they could dominate the sport pretty well. And I bet that's what Martina knows because she played at the top level.
This is one of those
Well, I think
issues.
there's a real debate to be had about what at elite level sports what the trans policy should be. And it's also a fact that when you stop testosterone, you start estrogen, many of your advantages change.
Yeah. Well, I don't think your shoulders or your hips. All right, we're out of time. We should do a whole hour on this. All right, you guys, thank you for joining us. Last bite when we come back.
I mean, you read one story after another or hear it, and it's all based on one anonymous administration official, a former administration official, right? I mean, that's not journalism, that's the responsibility for fake news begins with us. If we bear some responsibility for that, and we're not taking ownership of that and addressing it. We just want to blame it all, on somebody else, and that's not how life works, right?
Kudos to Lara Logan for laying bare what we all know about the media. Too many anonymous sources, not enough facts. Pause before you make a conclusion and put an outrageous allegation out there. That's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night team take it from here, and I have Shannon's new book in my office. I just got it, although it's not out yet, and I thought it was. So I'm promoting it all over the place,
Well,
and now
thanks.
people can't buy it?
Hey,
what is that?
Pre-orders are never a bad thing. Laura, thank you so much.
All right.
Baseball today is the American way. Of course, the next best thing to a seat in the stands is a seat in front of a 19-inch RCA Victor television. One more day to Labor Day weekend, the traditional occasion for tasty outdoor barbecues or picnics.
completely agree with all the obstacles and with all the enemies who are between me and...